the primal desire. There is a fire that burns within us all, a fire that ignites when we are wronged, betrayed, humiliated. It is not a gentle flame of contemplation, but a consuming rage that whispers promises of satisfaction, of balance restored, of wounds made equal. We call this fire revenge, and it is perhaps the most ancient and seductive of all human impulses. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote that the desire for revenge is the poisonous weed that grows in the garden of the wounded soul. Yet why does this weed grow so readily? Why does the fantasy of retribution bring such dark pleasure to the mind that has been injured? The answer lies not in our morality, but in something far deeper, something woven into the very fabric of our being. When someone harms us, we do not simply feel pain. We feel a cosmic imbalance, an injustice that tears at the order of our world. The scales have tipped, and deep within our psyche, an alarm sounds. Something must be done. The universe itself demands correction. This is not merely anger. This is the primal scream for justice, for restoration, for the world to make sense again. But what exactly is revenge? Is it justice wearing a darker mask? Or is it something entirely different, something more dangerous and more human? Why do we fantasize about the suffering of those who have wronged us? Why does the thought of their downfall bring us a satisfaction that we are almost ashamed to admit? The psychology of revenge is a journey into the deepest caverns of the human soul, where shadow meets light, where morality wrestles with instinct, and where we discover truths about ourselves that civilization teaches us to hide. The evolutionary roots of revenge. To understand revenge, we must travel backwards through time. Not decades or centuries, but millennia. We must return to the primordial world where our ancestors lived, where survival was not guaranteed, and where every interaction carried the weight of life and death. Revenge is not a modern psychological phenomenon. It is an evolutionary inheritance carved into our neural architecture through millions of years of natural selection. Our ancestors who could not defend themselves, who could not retaliate against those who stole from them or harmed their kin, did not survive to pass on their genes. The meek may have inherited the earth in spiritual teachings, but in evolutionary terms, it was the vengeful who ensured the survival of their bloodline. Consider for a moment the small tribal groups in which humans evolved. In these intimate communities of perhaps 50 to 150 individuals, reputation was everything. If someone could harm you without consequence, you became a target. Others will see your weakness and exploit it. But if you retaliated, if you made the cost of harming you too high, you established a boundary. You communicated a simple but powerful message. I am not to be trifled with. This is what evolutionary psychologists call costly signaling. Revenge, even when it comes at personal cost, serves as a signal to the social group. It says, I will defend my interest even at great expense to myself. This creates what game theorists call deterrence. The willingness to seek revenge prevents future transgressions. It maintains social order through the threat of retaliation. But evolution gave us more than just a capacity for revenge. It gave us the desire for it. It made revenge feel good. When we contemplate the suffering of someone who has wronged us, specific regions of our brain activate, the same regions associated with reward and pleasure. The striatum, in particular, lights up with activity. Our brain treats the idea of revenge like it treats food when we are hungry or water when we are thirsty. It is a need, a craving, a biological imperative disguised as a moral feeling. Yet here we encounter the first great paradox of revenge. What served our ancestors in small tribal groups often betrays us in the vast, complex societies we have built. The revenge that once maintained social order now threatens to destroy it. The fire that once protected us now consumes us. Justice versus vengeance, the psychological divide. We must now make a crucial distinction, one that philosophy has grappled with for thousands of years. What separates justice from vengeance? Are they different things entirely, or are they merely different names for the same impulse? Justice, as conceived by civilized society, is impersonal. It is the blind goddess with her scales, weighing evidence without passion, delivering punishment without pleasure. Justice seeks to restore balance through measured, proportional response. It operates through systems, through laws and courts and procedures. It asks not what will satisfy the victim, but what will maintain the social contract. Vengeance, by contrast, is deeply personal. It is hot where justice is cold, passionate where justice is measured. Vengeance does not seek proportion, it seeks satisfaction. It asks not what is fair, but what will heal the wound in the soul of the wronged, and here lies its danger and its seduction. The philosopher Francis Bacon wrote that revenge is a kind of wild justice, which the more man's nature runs to, the more ought law to weed it out. He understood that vengeance is justice's shadow, its primitive ancestor, the thing we must transcend if we are to live together in peace. Yet Bacon also recognized something profound. The desire for revenge is part of man's nature. It runs in us like a river finding its course. When we are wronged, we do not initially think in terms of legal procedures or social contracts. We think in terms of pain given and pain returned. We imagine scenarios where the person who harmed us experiences equivalent suffering. We fantasize about their humiliation, their regret, their understanding of what they have done. This is not justice. This is something older, something more primal, something that speaks from the depths of the human psyche. Carl Jung would recognize in this impulse the working of the shadow, that part of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. We like to think of ourselves as good, as moral, as civilized beings who rise above base instincts, but revenge reveals the shadow. It shows us that beneath our cultivated exterior lives, something savage, something that delights in the suffering of those who have harmed us. To confront our desire for revenge is to confront this shadow, to acknowledge that we are not purely beings of light. The distinction between justice and vengeance is therefore not merely legal or philosophical. It is psychological. Justice satisfies the rational mind, the part of us that understands social cooperation and long-term consequences. Vengeance satisfies something deeper, something that exists beneath reason, something that speaks in the ancient language of reciprocity and retribution. Justice is what we have built. Vengeance is what we are. The shadow and revenge. Jungian perspective. Jung taught us that what we refuse to face in ourselves does not disappear. It descends into the unconscious, where it grows in darkness, gathering power, waiting for the moment to emerge. The shadow is not simply our capacity for evil. It is everything we have denied, everything we have pushed away in order to maintain our image of ourselves as good, as civilized, as acceptable to society. And what have we been taught to deny more fiercely than our desire for revenge? From childhood, we are instructed to forgive, to turn the other cheek, to rise above our baser instincts. We are told that revenge is wrong, that it makes us no better than those who have harmed us. These teachings are not false, but they are incomplete. They tell us what we should not do, but they do not acknowledge what we feel. And feelings that are not acknowledged do not vanish. They sink into the shadow. When someone wrongs us deeply, something ancient awakens in the depths. It is not the civilized self that responds first. It is the shadow, and it speaks in a voice we barely recognize. It whispers plans of retribution. It paints vivid pictures of suffering returned. It offers us the dark satisfaction of balance restored through pain inflicted. And in our secret heart, we listen. We may not act on these whispers, but we listen. And in listening, we taste something forbidden and deeply human. Jung would say that to integrate a shadow, we must first acknowledge it. We must admit that, yes, we desire revenge. Yes, we take pleasure in imagining the downfall of those who have harmed us. Yes, beneath our morality and our civilization, there lives something savage that understands only the ancient law of reciprocity. This admission is not permission to act. It is the beginning of consciousness, the first step toward integrating what we have denied. But there is something more complex happening here. The desire for revenge is not merely about inflicting pain, it is about being seen. When we are wronged, especially when we are wronged publicly or profoundly, we feel erased. Our pain is invisible to the world. The injustice we have suffered goes unacknowledged. Revenge, then, becomes a way of making our pain visible, of forcing the world to recognize what has been done to us. It is a scream that demands to be heard. Consider the etymology of the word revenge itself. It comes from the Latin revindicare, to reclaim, to assert ownership. Revenge is about reclaiming something that has been taken. But what exactly has been taken? Sometimes it is concrete, property, or opportunity, or physical well-being. But often, what has been taken is more abstract and more precious. Dignity, self-respect, the sense that we matter, that we cannot be harmed without consequence. This is why revenge fantasies are so persistent and so detailed. They are not simply about causing pain. They are elaborate scenarios in which the perpetrator finally understands, finally sees what they have done, finally feels the weight of their actions, finally acknowledges our worth. In the theater of revenge that plays out in our minds, we are not merely executioners. We are witnesses to recognition, to the moment when the scales balance and justice, however dark, is finally served. The cycle of retaliation, existential imprisonment. But here we must confront a terrible truth that countless generations have learned through blood and tears. Revenge does not end conflict, it perpetuates it. The satisfaction we imagine, the closure we crave, rarely arrives in the way we envision. Instead, revenge sets in motion a cycle that can span generations, destroying not just individuals, but entire families, entire communities, entire nations. The ancient Greeks understood this with a clarity that modern psychology is only beginning to rediscover. Their myths are filled with cycles of revenge that destroy everyone they touch. The house of Atreus, cursed by generations of retribution, each act of vengeance spawning the next, each generation believing their revenge is justified, failing to see that they have become what they sought to destroy. Orestes kills his mother to avenge his father, but in doing so, he becomes a matricide, pursued by the Furies, tormented by guilt, discovering too late that revenge has not brought peace but only more suffering. The existentialists, particularly Sartre and Camus, saw in the cycle of revenge a form of bad faith, a denial of human freedom. When we dedicate ourselves to vengeance, we surrender our freedom to the past. We allow what has been done to us to define what we will do. We become reactive rather than creative, determined by injury rather than by choice. The person who harmed us continues to control us, not through their present actions, but through our inability to move beyond what they did. Sartre would say that, in revenge, we flee from the anxiety of freedom into the false comfort of necessity. We tell ourselves we have no choice, that we must seek retribution, that honor or justice or closure demands it. But this is self-deception. We always have a choice. The choice to seek revenge is still a choice, and in making it, we take responsibility not just for the act, but for all its consequences, for all the suffering it will cause, for all the ways it will shape who we become. Consider the blood feuds that have ravaged human societies across cultures and centuries. In Albania, the Kanun, an ancient code of honor, dictated that blood must be answered with blood. Families would be locked in cycles of killing that spanned decades. Young men would spend their entire lives trapped in their homes, prisoners of a revenge debt incurred by ancestors they never knew. The original injury, whatever it was, became irrelevant. What mattered was the cycle itself, self-perpetuating, feeding on itself, transforming human beings into instruments of an impersonal fate. This is the existential trap of revenge. We believe we are asserting our freedom, our refusal to be victimized. But in reality, we are submitting to a script written by the injury itself. We become characters in a story we did not author, following a plot we did not choose. Our actions, which feel like expressions of agency, are actually expressions of bondage to the past. Nietzsche, who thought so deeply about revenge, called it resentment, a poisoning of the spirit. He saw in the desire for revenge a weakness masquerading as strength. The truly powerful, he argued, do not need revenge. They act from abundance, from creative power, from a sense of their own worth that cannot be diminished by injury. It is the weak who nurse their wounds, who keep ledgers of grievance, who define themselves by what has been done to them, rather than by what they will create. Yet we must be careful not to confuse Nietzsche's insight with a simple prescription to forgive and forget. Nietzsche was not preaching Christian morality. He was diagnosing a psychological condition. Resentment is not the desire for justice or the acknowledgement of genuine harm. It is the festering of injury, the way the wound becomes the identity, the way the past becomes a prison we build for ourselves, brick by brick, grievance by grievance. The question then becomes, how do we honor our pain without being consumed by it? How do we acknowledge injury without surrendering our future to the past? How do we break the cycle of revenge without betraying ourselves, without pretending the harm never happened, without becoming complicit in our own diminishment? The neuroscience of retribution. Modern neuroscience has given us a window into the brain of revenge, and what we see there is both illuminating and disturbing. When we witness punishment being delivered to someone who has wronged us, the dorsal striatum activates, the same region that responds to rewards like food, money, or drugs. Revenge, quite literally, activates the pleasure centers of the brain, but there is more. Brain imaging studies have shown that when people contemplate revenge, there is increased activity in the prefrontal cortex, the region associated with planning and decision-making, and in the anterior cingulate cortex, which processes emotional pain. The brain is not simply seeking pleasure. It is attempting to resolve an emotional wound through the planning and execution of retribution. Revenge is the brain's attempt at emotional problem-solving. Researchers have also discovered something fascinating about the anticipation of revenge versus its actual execution. The anticipation activates reward centers intensely. We feel pleasure imagining the suffering of those who have wronged us. But when revenge is actually carried out, when we witness the actual suffering we have caused, the picture becomes more complicated. For many people, the satisfaction is less than imagined. Guilt, emptiness, and sometimes even increased distress follow. This is the great illusion of revenge. We believe it will bring closure, that the satisfaction will be as sweet as we imagine. But the fantasy of revenge is almost always more satisfying than its reality. Why? Because in fantasy, we control everything. The person suffers in exactly the way we want. They understand perfectly what they have done. They feel appropriate remorse. The world acknowledges our justice, but reality rarely cooperates with our fantasies. There is also the matter of empathy. When we imagine revenge, we often suppress our capacity for empathy. We dehumanize the target of our revenge, reducing them to the injury they caused us. But when we witness actual suffering, even of someone who has harmed us, our mirror neurons activate. We feel, however faintly, their pain, and this empathic response creates cognitive dissonance. We wanted them to suffer, but now that they do, we feel uncomfortable. We wanted simple satisfaction, but we receive moral complexity. The neuroscience of revenge reveals something profound about human nature. We are wired both for retribution and for empathy, for aggression and for connection. These systems exist in tension within us. The desire for revenge is real, rooted in our evolutionary history and our neural architecture. But so is our capacity for compassion, for understanding, for transcending the cycle of harm. What this means is that the struggle with revenge is not a struggle between good and evil, between our higher and lower selves. It is a struggle between different aspects of our humanity, each with its own evolutionary logic, each with its own claim on our behavior. We are not flawed for wanting revenge. We are human. The question is which aspect of our humanity we will choose to cultivate, which neural pathways we will strengthen through our choices and our attention. Beyond revenge, transformation and liberation. If revenge is a trap, if it perpetuates cycles of suffering, if it binds us to the past, then what is the alternative? This is not a simple question, and anyone who offers simple answers has not truly grappled with the depth of human pain. The alternative to revenge is not weakness. It is not passivity. It is not pretending that harm does not matter. The alternative to revenge is transformation. Jung spoke of individuation, the process by which we become fully ourselves, integrating all aspects of our psyche, including the shadow. When we are harmed, we stand at a crossroads. One path leads to revenge, to the perpetuation of the cycle, to becoming what we hate. The other path leads inward, to the deep work of transformation, to the forging of meaning from suffering. This is not the same as forgiveness, at least not in the way forgiveness is commonly understood. We are often told to forgive as if it were a switch we can flip, a decision we can make with our conscious mind. But true forgiveness, if it comes at all, is not a decision. It is a process, often a long and painful one. It is something that happens to us when we do the work of integration, when we face our shadow, when we metabolize our pain rather than project it outward. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps, discovered in the depths of unimaginable suffering a truth that transforms our understanding of revenge. He wrote that between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. The Nazis could take everything from him: his family, his health, his freedom, but they could not take his ability to choose his response to what they had done. This is the secret that revenge obscures. When we are harmed, we believe that revenge will restore our power, but the deeper truth is that our power never left us. It resides in our capacity to choose, moment by moment, who we will become in response to what has been done to us. Will we become instruments of the cycle, or will we become something new, something that the injury could not predict or control? The Stoic philosophers understood this. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the best revenge is not to be like that, to refuse to become what harmed us, to maintain our integrity in the face of injury, to transform suffering into wisdom rather than into more suffering. This is not weakness. This is strength of a kind that revenge can never achieve. It is the strength to break the cycle, to stop the momentum of harm, to say with our lives that it ends here, with me, now. But transformation requires something that revenge does not. It requires us to face our pain directly without the distraction of fantasizing about the suffering of others. It requires us to sit with the injustice, to feel the full weight of it, to acknowledge that something precious was taken and will never be returned. This is harder than revenge. Revenge gives us something to do, a project, a focus for our energy. Transformation requires us to be with what is, without the comfort of action, without the illusion of control. There is also the matter of narrative. When we are harmed, a story forms in our mind. We are the victim, they are the villain. Justice demands retribution. This story has a certain simplicity, a certain clarity, but it is a story that imprisons us. Transformation requires us to complicate this narrative, to see ourselves and the person who harmed us with more nuance, to acknowledge our own capacity for harm, to recognize the complex web of causes that led to this moment. This does not mean excusing what was done. It does not mean pretending that harm is acceptable. It means seeing more clearly, seeing the fuller picture, seeing the humanity even in those who have acted inhumanly. When we can hold this complexity, when we can see the person who harmed us as more than just the harm they caused, something shifts. The grip of revenge loosens, not because we have decided to let go, but because we have expanded our consciousness to include more truth. Rumi, the Sufi poet, wrote that the wound is the place where the light enters you. This is the deepest secret of transformation. Our injuries, if we let them, can become portals to a deeper understanding of ourselves and of the human condition. They can crack open the armor of our ego, letting us see truths we could not see when we felt invulnerable. They can connect us to the suffering of others, creating compassion where there was only self-concern. They can teach us about impermanence, about the fragility of all we hold dear, about the precious nature of each moment we are given. But this transformation is not guaranteed. The wound can also become infected, festering with resentment, becoming the center around which our entire identity revolves. Whether the wound becomes a portal or a prison depends on how we tend to it, what we do in the space between injury and response, whether we choose the path of revenge or the path of transformation. The path of transformation does not mean we do nothing in response to harm. It means our response comes from a different place. We may still seek justice through legitimate systems. We may still establish boundaries, protecting ourselves from further harm. We may still speak truth, naming what was done and its impact. But these actions come from clarity rather than from rage, from self-respect rather than from the need to diminish another, from the desire to restore balance rather than from the hunger for suffering. The psychology of revenge reveals us to ourselves. It shows us our evolutionary inheritance, our neural wiring, our shadow, our capacity for both destruction and transcendence. It confronts us with fundamental questions about justice, about freedom, about who we will become in response to life's inevitable injuries. We cannot eliminate the desire for revenge. It is part of being human, woven into our biology and our psychology. But we can choose what we do with this desire. We can feed it, letting it grow until it consumes us, until we become defined by our wounds and our grievances. Or we can witness it, acknowledge it, and then turn towards something deeper, toward the hard work of transformation, toward the creation of meaning from suffering. The person who harms us takes something from us, but if we devote ourselves to revenge, we give them something more. We give them the power to determine who we will become. We surrender our freedom to the past. We become characters in their story rather than authors of our own. True freedom, true power, lies not in revenge, but in transformation. It lies in our capacity to face our shadow, to feel our pain fully, to acknowledge the injustice, and then to choose, consciously and deliberately, who we will be. Will we perpetuate the cycle of harm? Or will we break it? Will we become what wounded us? Or will we become something new? Something that injury could not predict. Something that transforms darkness into light. This is the choice that revenge obscures but that consciousness reveals. It is perhaps the most important choice we will ever make. And it is a choice we make not once, but again and again, moment by moment, breath by breath, as we navigate this complex, painful, beautiful experience of being human. The scales may never balance the way we want them to. Justice may never be served in the way we imagine. But in choosing transformation over revenge, we discover something more valuable than satisfaction. We discover our freedom. We discover our power to shape ourselves. We discover that we are more than what has been done to us. And in that discovery, we find not the closure that revenge promises but never delivers, but something deeper. We find the capacity to live, truly live, not as prisoners of the past, but as creators of the future. Not as victims seeking retribution, but as human beings reclaiming the sovereignty of our own souls. If this exploration has touched something in you, if you have felt the weight of these questions in your own life, I invite you to sit with what has emerged. Do not rush to conclusions. Do not demand immediate answers. Let these ideas work on you the way water works on stone, slowly, patiently, carving new channels of understanding. Consider subscribing to this channel if you hunger for content that does not shy away from complexity, that honors your intelligence, that explores the depths of human psychology and philosophy. Share this with someone who might be wrestling with these questions. Leave a comment sharing your own reflections, your own struggles with revenge and transformation. We are in this together, all of us trying to make sense of being human in a world that wounds us and asks us again and again who we will become.